Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Elizabeth from Psychology for Geeks, and today we're doing part 2 of our tier list for the different therapeutic modalities. And once again, Mark is joining us. So wait, just a quick recap. Last time on this very channel,
Last time
we
on Dragon
talked
Ball
about.
Z.
Dude, that's exactly what was in my mind when I said that. Um, So we said REBT and solution focus were very, very solid modalities that we both really enjoy using.
Mm-hmm.
B tiered was EMDR because it's so very good when it comes to trauma, and I think related to that, but not
much
so
for
much
everything
with
else.
anything else. Yeah, and it's kind of like mid compared to, well, it's not that it's mid, but it's in the same sort of standing as something else, like another modality. So it's still very good.
Right. There are better
nonetheless.
interventions for those other things.
Yes. Rogerian or humanistic, it's pretty good. And I fought, you guys. I fought to make it higher, but
I
Mark
convinced
was
her.
right that it has a very good foundation, but it's almost kind of like if it was taken one step farther, it could be better,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
it kind of stopped and it kind of turned out to be a little mushy.
Right. It's
So
basically
we're
just the
gonna
therapeutic relationship and nothing really beyond that. And the therapeutic relationship is foundational to every therapy. So it's like,
yeah.
if you're just the foundation, you're kind of like, then you're going to be the foundation. You're going to be the middle of the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we both said, this
So middle of the road it
psychoanalysis.
is.
No, for psychoanalysis,
Oh, yeah.
because
Yeah.
only because it takes so long. It's really difficult to train for, really expensive. It requires a lot of time on the
It's
part of
very
the
vague.
clinician. It's very vague. So not that it's not good, it's just it's very difficult to generalize.
It's not so
Yeah.
it's not so efficient, and there are more efficient, not necessarily, I guess, not being that it's more efficient, yes, better interventions. The same way
Mm-hmm.
how psychoanalysis is basically the leeches of psychotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
In mention of like using leeches medicinally.
Wait,
What?
I'm guessing there's people that eat leeches, right?
There might be. I'm sure in some part of the world.
Do you think they're tasty? I was thinking maybe they taste like eel, because I like eel.
I never tried it. I wouldn't even know where to start.
Let me know if you tried it in the comments.
Yes, let us know if you develop this anywhere.
um, or if you've been bitten by one, I will select it. Where are they even found? Like in the Amazon rainforest?
No, you can find them in like some forests. You can find them like at least in New York, upstate, with like a lot of sleepaway camps, in parts that the grass that isn't well mowed or anything like that. You can get leeches or near lakes. Yeah, you can get them a lot of places.
Well, I tend to avoid those places. So
Fair enough.
I'm a nerd. I don't go outside.
You got to be selective about where you touch grass.
Yes, there you go. Because I do it so rarely. All right, so I have here the rest of the modalities in here. So let's. Oh no, they fell. One fell on the floor, so that's going to be the last one.
Okay, let's go with that. I mean, the first one.
ACT.
ACT, yes. Acceptance and commitment therapy. So,
Yes.
acceptance and commitment therapy is very similar to solution focused in that. So it differs in the sense that it's another like offshoot of CBT, which we haven't even gotten to yet, but it's an offshoot of CBT. But it's similar to solution focus in that it's not necessarily its own thing. Basically, what it is, it takes a bunch of things from a different bunch of modalities and puts it into its own thing. So, for example, mindfulness. It takes the acceptance part of REBT. It takes the behavioral activation part and the commitment of CBT. It's just a bunch of these aspects that all come together. It is also much like Rogerian in that it's not exactly meant to be used by itself. It's meant to be used as an add-on to other modalities, regardless of what the modality is.
I would still rank it higher though, because it's not as vague. It's feel like it's easy to use. It does work.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I really like about it is that there's a lot of good research that talks about
Yes.
for like chronic pain or like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
physical problems. It really works well, which is something that in general we don't tend to take into account
Mm-hmm.
for mental health,
Yes.
which we should. But then we will never
100%.
leave school if that was the case, because we will have to learn so much. But even if we're not an expert when it comes to like physical conditions, we have to know a little bit of how it
Right.
affects our mental health. So
No,
I
a
do.
hundred percent.
I use this quite often. I really liked the value things that they system thingy that
Mm-hmm.
they have. I use that all the time as well. Um, I really do like once again, kind of like our EBT. It's like a step higher than or like more in depth version of CBT. It feels
Yes.
like a bit more complete. Um, so what would you score it then
Honestly, being
or
that it's
rank it?
that it basically fits onto every other modality, and that it itself is good because of that, I'm gonna put S.
Yeah, I was like, no, don't say it.
It's S because there's like almost I can't think of a single modality that it would be contraindicated with, like that it would not work well with.
Well, okay, but okay. So why are we putting act under S and we didn't do that for our EBT?
I'm glad you asked that. So REBT is its own thing, and it wants to model itself as that. And with Rogerian, I thought you were gonna ask about Rogerian. So the thing about Rogerian is that Rogerian, again, it's just a therapeutic relationship. It's nothing more than the foundation just being used more of. ACT knows what it is. It is a thing that is meant to be used in addition to everything, to something else, and not just something else, just about everything else. And because of that incredible, trying to find that versatility,
Mm.
you don't really find that with anything else. And that it still works, even, it makes whatever you do better. It's like the cherry on top of every other intervention. That's why I'm putting it as S.
And it's so one of the things, oh wait, I totally forgot. I forgot to do this because I was like, no, wait, just let's get to talking about this thing. So in the previous video, I did sort of like this disclaimer that this is based on our opinion and we're rating it on three different things, right? Like what the research says, what
Yes.
our own experience is, and how generalizable it is. And I think
Yes.
that's one of the really good things about ACT is that it's so generalized. Yeah, like it's so
Mm-hmm.
easy to understand, to use, and it fits with pretty much everything. Like I said,
Yes.
including physical, like chronic pain stuff. So
Yes.
yeah,
I agree.
that's wow. I actually didn't think we were gonna have um,
And
something
S,
S tier. Yeah.
it's just so, like I said, it's so versatile. That's like, if I had to give one detraction, it's that it's not its own thing. But I don't think that's such a bad thing when it comes to helping patients. I think anything that's in the toolbox is useful.
Well, and that was something that we kind of hinted at the previous video. It's that a lot of these are great if used with something else. And when you like are in sort of like the real world environment, like outside of the classroom and like the research lab,
In the
you
field.
kind of have to, yeah, you kind of have to use all of these, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then so that's again the strength of ACT, that it's so many into one. And even though it's not its individual one, it is just so good because it works, it helps.
I agree.
So all right, cool.
What's
Let's go
next?
on to the next one. IFS.
IFS. So I'll let you start with
Oh,
that.
oh, I was like internal family systems.
Yes.
And I, well, you know what? I think it's good that you let me start because I am so biased with this one.
Tell me how
I
much.
am biased because I haven't necessarily taken a class on this. All of my learnings has been sort of like on my own
Mm-hmm.
because my school didn't really focus on this. It was all about CBT.
Hmm.
So that I think that's why I have like a love-hate relationship with CBT. It's just like, no, focus something else.
Interesting.
Anyway, IFS, I love it because I think it is particularly helpful with BIPOC populations.
Hmm.
because it tends to integrate a lot more than just the individual. I like that.
Interesting. Okay. It's been interesting. My program focused a lot on Rogerian. It was
Oh,
a
really?
very yeah, it was really Rogerian heavy.
Oh, that's because you're in the East.
I don't know if
Just
I don't know if
so
that's a thing.
so what I've heard, this is the word on the street,
Uh-huh.
is
Uh-huh.
that the East Coast, because that's where a lot of these like modalities kind of got started.
Mm-hmm.
That's where like it's heavier over there because we don't really use those here. We use
Interesting.
the more like the newer ones because I live in California, so it's all about the newest, hottest thing in the block.
That makes sense. Okay, maybe.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that. I'll look into that. That's interesting. So my idea with internal family systems is my big thing is research. I love looking at the research. I love looking at meta-analyses and systemic reviews. And a big book that I'm a huge proponent of that I think that every therapist should read is by Scotto Lilienfeld and a couple of other researchers, one of them named Lynn, is Science and Pseudoscience in Clinical Psychology. And
Mm.
it's a very good book. I think it's required reading for everybody who's in our field.
Hey, maybe
Um,
we should do a video on that. I'm
yeah,
interested.
100%. As well as there's also another one called Science and Pseudoscience in Social Work, and that's by a woman named, I think her last name is Pignotti. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. Anyway, when they were talking about internal family systems, um, they really showed how there wasn't a lot of very good support for it when you take away allegiance bias from the studies, and that in regards to how effective it is or things that prove its effectiveness, even Schwartz, who is the developer of internal family systems, had said in a thing that's unfortunately no longer on the internet, but it used to be, that the greatest evidence for internal family systems is the reports that the therapists who use it give. So there has not been a single well-designed outcomes study for IFS.
Well, I think this is very similar to psychoanalysis in that it's a way of life. It's a way of sort of like thinking. It's not necessarily because when I was looking into it, like I couldn't really find specific research for it because it's so hard to research. Because what are you researching again? Like
Sure.
there isn't like a
I know,
specific
which means
thing,
that its
and
construct validity is not very good. So, because IFS, it's the major thing of its constructs are the parts. That's the internal families, the parts. If I remember correctly, there is the firefighter, there is the manager, and there's one more. I forget what it is. Do you remember what it is? Do you not know? Because I can always try to look it
I
up.
I don't remember anything that has to do with like
Yes,
what is it?
I have it here. There's the managers, there's the firefighters, and there's the exiles. That's what it is.
Uh,
And so this is the construct, kind of like what Freud came up with, the id, ego, and superego. Great constructs, great philosophically. And the problem is that it has no construct validity, meaning that these, for those who are not super into research, is that this construct, this thing that we created, is it does it actually exist, or is it just a philosophical idea? So like the Force, for example, from Star Wars, like okay, like it's cool, like I can wrap my head around it, but it doesn't actually exist. So it's
does
kind
it
of like,
work? Does it?
well, not like it does in Star Wars.
Maybe we just don't have the mitochondrions inside of us or
The
something.
midichlorians.
Yeah, there you go.
The midichlorians. Yeah, no, it doesn't. The same, like its construct validity is about as supported as the idea of like, chakras. And I don't mean from Naruto, I mean like actual chakras. Like it has the same level of support.
Okay, so I think this one, once again, it's good because it tried to get out something that the other theories didn't, but
Hmm.
it kind of fell short. It's not
Yeah.
quite there yet. It's still kind of like half baked, and
Yeah.
like taking one or two steps further, it will be great, I think.
If
Uh,
it could get it's a bit more scientific. And so like the way I see it, I just want to put one more thing and then I'm done with it,
mm,
is that I think if it was being used by like say a life coach, it's phenomenal. But for therapists who we are scientifically trained, we are, especially, if you're a psychologist, whether you're a PhD or a PsyD, if you're a researcher practitioner or you're a practitioner scholar, it doesn't matter. You're trained in research. You're trained to be someone who should be basing your interventions off the research, off the empirical literature. And so for us as clinicians, I don't think it's apropos. So in terms of this tier list,
Mm.
for us as therapists, I would put it at D.
Um, y- yes, so would I. But I do think that there is an element of chakras or the force that we're not fully able to understand in through science. And I think these like IFS or maybe even psychoanalysis can kind of get close to it or trying to get close to it, but it can't really pinpoint it because there is a lot of faith in a lot of like cultures. It's like very important. So like I said earlier, I am very biased on this one only because I think it addresses more of the problems or the lifestyle, the values of BIPOC populations.
You know, what's going through my mind was that, like, this whole conversation on IFS, and like
Mm.
you're saying, listen, chakras and these metaphysical things might exist, and I'm like, no, I think that there's no better. I feel like there's no better proof that you're from California and I'm from New York.
I'm all like spiritual. I mean, you're like,
and
no.
and, and I'm the jaded New Yorker's like, no.
Because I listened to this one podcast and the guy has like this whole channel dedicated to like dismissing like anything that has to be like has to do with ghosts and stuff, and it is so funny. But I'm like, but I still believe in ghosts, and I'm still scared of them.
I don't
Still,
believe in ghosts at
still
all.
scary. Oh, see, there you go. That's where we differ. That's why I was like, I'm biased.
I don't believe in
But once
ghosts
again, I
at
think
all.
this sort of like proves what we were. I think we said it in the. I forgot which video we said it.
Mhm.
Just go back and watch the other videos, so you're
Watch
up to
all of
date on
them.
everything. Yes. Um, but again, like every therapist has their own style. So like for example, maybe working with me is not your cup of tea, but working with Mark will be like, heaven on earth. Like I don't know. Or like, vice versa. So again, that's why it's so
Yeah.
important when you are searching for a therapist, do some shopping. Don't stay with the first one that
Hmm.
says yes, I have availability.
Yeah. Sometimes
um,
takes 2 to 3.
all right, let's go with the next one.
Okay, we're running low.
Psychodynamic.
Psychodynamic. Okay, so better than psychoanalysis because it actually does have some scientific support to it. In fact, there was actually an umbrella study that was done, I think, in 2023. And for those who don't know, so like there's a hierarchy when it comes to evidence, so near the top is things like systemic reviews and meta-analyses, and then above that is umbrella studies. Umbrella studies are basically meta-analyses of meta-analyses.
Mm,
And so what it showed was that there is some decent support for psychodynamic. Um, it's not incredibly strong, like it was like a medium effect size, but that it works about as well as CBT when it comes to things like trauma, for example. So like trauma-focused CBT and psychodynamic work fairly well. Depression, there was a slight difference. It wasn't huge. It was statistically significant, but the effect size difference was very small. Um, it's also pretty good for anxiety. It's very, very good for relational issues. Um, honestly would put it anywhere between A and B.
I was gonna go with B because it's so. I was trying to distinguish between psychoanalysis and psychodynamic because they're so similar
Hmm.
in the name. And my only thing is that it is better than psychoanalysis because it focuses more on the present and like the social factor
Hmm.
and emotional expression, which I think a lot of other therapies tend to ignore. Like for example, CBT doesn't really take emotions into account
Not as much.
too much. Yeah. So yes, I think it's good in that sense, but it's not very generalized.
Generalizable.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think yeah, I will go with B.
Yeah, so it depends
Let's
on what
go
it's being
with
used for. Like, I think something like the OCD, for example, it could work. Like, because that's kind of anxiety based in a way. So, like I said, it's very good with anxiety as well. Um, it's controversial if it's good when it comes to psychosis. And in regards to things such as bipolar disorder or even working with kids, it's also, there's some evidence to support it, some against it. So it's still some controversy about it. Also, a major thing about it, much like in the same way as, I forget which other therapy we said. I think it was EMDR. No, it was psychoanalysis as well. In much the same way that how much of it is due to the interventions and the idea of psychodynamic theory and how much of it is due to the relationship is still
Mhm.
being studied.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, I agree with you in that I think it depends on who's doing it, how well trained they are,
Mm-hmm.
on this, and what they're trying to treat.
Yes,
So it's
100%.
solid. It's solid for what it works for, but not so much
Exactly.
for everything else. Yeah. All right. All right. We have one more, and then the one that's on the floor.
Let's see which one's on the floor.
Ooh.
Is CBT on the floor? I knew it. I knew it.
So this one is DBT.
DBT. Do you want to
I was
start?
talking trash about DBT this whole time, and
You really
it's
were.
evidence.
I, you did it on purpose.
No, they were all like crumpled up. And this is
Sure, sure.
what is this? This is the energy, the
This is
cosmic
the
energy
energy.
telling us that,
It's the
that
universe.
it sucks. Yeah. um
You start with DBT.
DBT, I am not as familiar with it. However, there is tons of research
Mm-hmm.
on very specific things.
Yes.
How it's very, very helpful when it comes to BPD, borderline personality disorder,
Mm-hmm.
and like suicide ideation and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
even in teens. But outside of that, it's kind of up in the air.
Yeah. So, DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, it was designed by Marshall Linehan specifically to treat borderline personality disorder, largely because Marshall Linehan has borderline personality disorder. So, obviously, it wasn't perfect at first. She took a lot of time. Uh, One thing I really like about DBT is how focused it is on research, because Marshall Linehan is a researcher at heart. She even um, does she puts so much effort into training students, clinical psychology students, in doing research and becoming better researchers. So she puts a lot of emphasis on that. Um, it's also it's one thing that you probably will not like about DBT is that it is very, very, very structured, way more than mainline CBT.
Mm-hmm.
You have to show up basically all the time. You have to go to groups and individual. There is a lot of homework. There's a lots of there is a joke, that like, oh, I love helping people, but I fucking hate trees because there's so many worksheets with DBT, so many, and they have so many acronyms. Like the most famous one is Dear Man, but it is very effective.
Mm-hmm.
It If you stay through to the whole thing, you don't miss a session. You whatever, you just really go into it, you will have, if you have BPD, your symptoms will reduce. It'll be easier to manage. It is also very good for suicide, as you said, because suicide is a piece of having BPD. So it's also, make sure to go on that aspect. There's a lot of mindfulness in DBT, a lot of it. Um, it's and then obviously it is also good for anxiety and depression as well. Not as much as mainline CBT because that's not really what it's meant for. Uh, but oh, and it can also help with PTSD, specifically with CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, because that has a very, 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 very high correlation with BPD. So the two go hand in hand, basically, and because of that, it helps to treat both of those very, very well.
So, my understanding of it, because I just had a brief class on this one, and my
Mm-hmm.
understanding of it is what it really works for is emotion regulation. That's what
Yes.
its main thing is. And for complex CPD, for borderline, that's kind of the main thing that is kind of like on fire all of the time. So if that's
Yes.
addressed, then it's a lot easier for other things. Um, I heard this rumor. You might know more about this because I don't. I really do like it. I don't use it very often. Different clients that I work with. Uh, but I know that there's like a lot of workbooks. There's a lot of things that you can refer to. There's also like a lot of trainings. So in that sense, it's pretty good. But I also heard that it was now being sort of like capped where like you had to be a DVT trained person in order to be able to use these things.
Yes, as it should be. I think that should be the way for every therapy.
I disagree on that. I think if you are saying that you are sort of like how do I say this? I think if you are primarily working with that population where CBT or DBT or EMDR are very helpful for, then definitely you need to be trained because that's your bread and butter. Like that's all you're doing, right? So you need to be very trained on that. I tend to work with all ages, all backgrounds, all varieties. So that's why I just kind of know a little bit about everything,
Sure.
but not a lot. So I don't have one in particular that like I dive
Well,
into.
so I think I need to clarify what I meant because I
Hmm.
think I didn't explain it very well. And that's on me. I think that you shouldn't be able to call yourself an EMDR therapist or a CBT
Hmm.
therapist or a
Mhm.
DBT therapist or any of these other things unless you have training and like a certification in that.
Yeah,
That's more so
yeah.
what I meant. I'm not saying, oh, you can't use these skills. I'm saying you can't call yourself that, or you shouldn't be able to call yourself that.
I kind of heard that it was it was getting to the point where you couldn't use any of like the acronyms or anything that was sort of related to DBT
Interesting.
unless you were, yeah. But again,
I don't know
there
how you would
is
enforce
a
that.
lot there is a lot of bias out there for certain modalities, and if you just don't like, and I think it's a little bit different nowadays because Marsha's still doing research to doing all these things.
Mm-hmm.
So, people can be biased, like, oh, if they had an encounter and they're like, oh, I don't like her for whatever
Sure.
reason, then, you're biased. We're only human. And for most of these other ones, they're so old.
Right. Exactly.
Like, we can't have beef with, Freud.
I mean,
I still have beef with Freud.
unfortunately, I would rank it at A, and I'll explain why.
Mhm.
So it has the same thing as EMDR in the sense that it's really good for what it's meant to be for. The reason I would put it higher than EMDR is because, unlike EMDR, it doesn't claim to be anything that it's not, or to work in a way that it doesn't. It's much more scientifically based than EMDR because of Marshall Linehan.
Yes, you're right. There's a lot more research to show how effective it is. And yeah, from the very beginning, it says this is what it's made for.
Hmm.
So yeah, I agree. I mean, other than that, I wouldn't rate it that
Yeah,
high, but it is
I
really good for what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
again, if EMDR was like, listen, we're exposure and this is what we're good for, and they weren't talking about bilateral stimulation, if they weren't talking about that, and they were honest about what it is and why it works and how it works and all of that, I put it at A. Okay. And
Well,
then there was one.
well, I think we're a little bit biased because we said like how generalizable it is, and like DBT, it's not very much.
True, true. It's not so I don't know about that because it's not as you're right, it's not as generalizable as say like CBT, but it is a CBT offshoot. So I think it's still more generalizable than EMDR because it's still good for CPTSD, it's good for PTSD, just like EMDR. It's good for depression, it's good for anxiety. It does everything EMDR does on top of what it does.
I think the only reason why I shall allow it to remain at
I,
A.
I'm willing for you to put it at B. Listen, if you want to put it at B, be my guest.
No,
I'm
I think
serious.
it's because it has so much um like actual like skills and methods for you to use,
Yes.
which makes it really easy. So if you're training someone in it, it's relatively easy for someone to pick it up and be able to say, or like, because even sometimes when I'm talking about sort of like, the wise brain thing,
Yes.
that just as an example, it's still like there's certain parts of it that I can still use somewhere else. So it's still somewhat generalizable. Um,
I would agree with that. The way that I just convinced you twice now, someone's going to be like, Elizabeth, if Mark's holding you hostage, blink twice.
no. Well, I think, well, again, I'm taking into account the fact that I know I'm biased. I haven't really used it because I don't work with it, but you do.
I don't really work with it either. I don't
Oh,
work with it
really?
that much. I know of it. I'm very well read on it, in my opinion
Mm.
at least. But I don't use it because I don't treat borderline, for example. I don't really work with trauma that much.
Do you
I treat
use it
trauma
for,
somewhat.
do you use it like, or some of the techniques for SI?
Yes. I use their suicidal intervention aspects of it. That I do, 100%.
Okay, see, there you go. So again, like I think I should have maybe, if I was doing this by myself, I would have had like another tier at the bottom saying that I don't have experience with it and I don't
And
have
A,
enough training. Yeah, I think that's why I'm kind of like, okay, I will be convinced either way because I don't have enough research to have like a or research or training on it, and also
if you have me,
experience
I'm giving the research.
to say that I'm kind of like, no, this is bad or this is good. What I do have is all the experience and all the stuff on CBT. But again, it's like I have this
So,
like
you know what?
love
You talk
hate
about it. You just
relationship.
start us off.
Listen, I am going to start ranting now.
Go for it.
I
Go for
think
it.
this is the one that kind of got shoved down our throat when I
Hmm.
was in school. And therefore, I use it a lot. It's very good, it's very effective. I tend to treat a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, and that's sort of like essentially what it's good for.
Hmm.
However, it doesn't take into account emotions, and that's a big boo for me because emotions are a huge part of us, and it's like a huge blank. Like it's not like I'm like, how could you forget there's emotions, not just thoughts, and behaviors.
I agree. I agree. I mean, so the answer to that, which I think is still a problem, is that there is such a thing as CEBT, which is like I think it's cognitive emotion behavioral therapy, which is almost like RBT, but like in their own version. But then people say, oh, it doesn't work with trauma. It's like, okay, you're right. So let's create TFCBT, trauma focused CBT. Oh, it doesn't work with autism. Okay, we'll make a CBT that's tailored to that. I think their issues are, oh, it doesn't work with this thing. Okay, let's modify it to work with that. I think that shows that there's a problem with the underlying thing, the mainline CBT. Like, yes, you're trying to fix it. I get it. But it should work with that already, just like REBT does, or solution focus, or DBT, you know? Um, so I'm I don't know where to rank it, because I'm definitely not putting it S, but I'm definitely not putting it C. And
Why? It will be so it would just like fit right there. Okay,
it
listen. Here's my advocacy for why it should be C.
okay, I'm listening.
Wait, hold on. I think I will have to also convince myself of this. I didn't think it through. I think C, it will look aesthetically good. No, I'm just
I
kidding.
mean, it would.
uh, okay, so I was thinking that C is just like it's solid. It's not the best. It works for what it does, but it is. It's not as mushy, I would say, psychoanalysis or IFS. Because it
Mm,
does have like specific things that you can do with it. Like, uh, however, one thing I don't like about it is that it is very procedural based for a
yes,
lot of places, and for some reason, insurance just think this is the shit. Like they
because it's
think
efficient. That's why.
yes, and but that's not how any of life works. Life is messy, and
Yes.
yes, it's effective, but it doesn't cover everything. So I think that's why I will still rank it higher than the other two, and I will just go with C. But it's kind of like a unfinished like Lego
So you
piece.
know what? I'll make you a
Mm,
compromise.
mm.
So I'm rethinking my idea on Rogerian. I'm thinking of putting Rogerian at C because it's the foundation to everything, and putting CBT at B.
Mm.
That's my compromise.
I wouldn't put CBT that high though.
Really?
Yeah, only because like what you were saying where they're like, oh well, it's missing this element. Oh, let's just add it and create a new one. And then oh, it's missing this other element. Oh, let's just add it and create a new one. And I'm like, well, is it CBT anymore? Like
So
it's just kind of like I feel like okay, if we put CBT and Rogerian both there, because they feel more like foundations of everything else. Because we kept saying, oh, ACT, DBT, REBT, they're kind of like offshoots of CBT.
hmm. So I'm thinking, you got me thinking, because and the reason I'm thinking is because in the you mentioned something like this earlier as well. In the research, they're always saying, okay, we want to compare it to something. And what is every modality always compared to in the research? CBT.
CBT.
And what they a lot of times find, like, oh, this modality it works just as well as CBT. So that's why I would say B, because a lot of times psychodynamic and especially EMDR is like, oh, listen, it's just as good as CBT. So like, okay, if it's just as good as CBT, then they should be on the same ranking. Because I don't think I think it's foundational, yes, to DBT, to REBT, to ACT. I don't think it's foundational to psychodynamic and EMDR. That's why I'm thinking it should be on the same level as them, on addition to they're always being compared. But Regerian is foundational to freaking everything. So that's why I'm thinking what I'm thinking.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be a foundation to all of them, but it's like a solid foundation.
Yeah,
Because
that's my compromise.
and I think part of the reason why CBT is seen like such a gold standard especially in research, is because it's so easy to look into. It's so easy to do. It's so easy to teach, and it's so easy to keep a track of, because it doesn't really deal with emotions, because those are messy. It doesn't really deal with like trauma and like the complicated personality stuff, because that's messy, right? That's why I wouldn't.
Yeah,
and
it
because
deals with emotions indirectly.
Yeah, because like psychodynamic and EMDR, they deal more with like the messy stuff, I feel like.
So yes, and that's also why I'm saying that I think it should be a B tier, because they deal with different things, but at the same kind of level. And I think Ruggieri, I honestly think that putting it at C with Ruggieri at C, putting Ruggieri at C with CBT at B, I think that's the most accurate in my opinion, if I'm being quite honest.
Okay, fine, you're the guest, but let it be known when I don't agree.
I also love how dark it is outside for me, but it's so bright for you still.
I know, like the sun is like hitting me in the face.
Only 3 hours apart.
Oh yeah, but it's getting close to winter. Well, we don't really have fall.
You don't get winter.
No, what we don't get is fall. That's what we don't get.
Do you have you ever seen snow with your own 2 eyes?
Yes, but only because I go to the mountains. We go to the snow.
Oh, I'm sorry. You have to go to higher altitude to see snow.
Yeah, but I lived in Indiana for my internship for about a year, and that's where I saw it. That's where the snow came to me.
Bro, I was once in LA and it started drizzling and all the shops closed.
That's because,
and I'm from New York, and I'm like, what is this?
I went to New York once, and then I was walking around when it was raining, and I was like, why are there so many people outside? I was like, I wasn't gonna stay in my hotel after traveling to New York, so of course I was outside, but I was like, why is everybody else outside?
It's a very different culture.
Yeah, and I'm like, I didn't have an umbrella. I don't think I own an umbrella. So
so this is our rankings.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Focus. Okay, so this is the rankings. You don't have to agree. As you could tell, we don't even agree with each other, and that's fine, because I think, again, every therapist has their comfort zone, the things that they are, more training, have more experience, that works with the population that they prefer to work with, and then so that's the thing. This is just basically an introduction of like how different modalities they are, and the way you do some research or ask your therapist about different things. I do enjoy when people come to a session for the first time and they say, hey, I'm looking for someone who is, doing EMDR. And I say, I don't do MDR. I can refer you to someone who does. And if you try it and then it doesn't work for you, then you can, go ahead and try something else. It's not sort of like, if that doesn't work, there are other options.
And that's the way it is. I also thought of one more thing. Kind of going on the CBT thing a little bit. So now you were saying like, we're both saying how, there was this criticism. Okay, we'll create another version of it. All these offshoots. But with REBT, it was, hey, you don't address this. And Ellis was like, you're right. So I'm going to remake the entire thing and incorporate that into the mainline thing, as opposed to, oh, you're right, let me just make a whole little subsection. That's why another reason I think REBT is better than CBT. Because they admitted, it's a fault. Let me fix that.
Yeah, and again, we just talked about like the 10 most recognizable ones. I do want to do another one of these where we talk about what I quote the fun ones and the ones that I really want to do more of, which would be more like play therapy, art therapy, geek therapy, superhero therapy, and then that way we can geek out about this and look more into the research
Hell yeah.
of it, and then we will do another tier list. So in the meantime, you can definitely check out Mark's socials and book. You want to talk a little bit about
Yeah.
where we can find you in your
Yeah,
book?
100%. So first off, again, Mark Davis, Alchemy Counseling. You can find me on Instagram at alchemy_counseling or my website, alchemycounselingny.com. I'm a Long Island-based therapist, but I also do virtual. I'm also licensed in New Jersey, Florida, and Connecticut. So if you're there, you can still work with me if you want to reach out. And if you're a clinician, therapist, whether psychotherapist, physical therapist, occupational therapist, nurse, doctor of any kind, doesn't matter, and you ever have a suicidal patient in your office and you're like, I don't know what to do, well, I got you covered. I wrote a book just for you, The Alchemy Approach. It is kept purposefully short because I want to make sure that you can open it up and get right to what you need, whether it's understanding the fundamentals of suicide, whether it's knowing how to do an assessment, whether it's wanting to know the exact techniques, or even how to implement them with little dialogues of treatment to show that. I even got an FAQ in the back.
And like
Everything
a
you can need.
research nerd, he has other research in there as well.
Bro, I got like pages upon pages of bibliography here. I'm huge into research. I want to make sure that everything I do and say is supported by it. So if you want some research-backed interventions and you want them stat, this book's for you. You can find the link in my Instagram. You just click the link; it'll take you right to it. Or you can DM me on Instagram, and I'll send you the link myself.
It's on Amazon too, isn't it?
There is a physical copy on Amazon, and I can send you the link to the digital version if you prefer that.
I don't. But for those who do, now you guys know how to do it. So all the links and everything are going to be in the description below in case you missed that. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this so you can be the first one to find out when we are doing the next one, and also what video comes out next, because I don't know. I never know. Sometimes like within the week we're like, nope, that one's not edited or recorded, so let's just throw another video out there. So make sure to follow us on our socials at psych the number 4 geeks, and oh yeah, join our Discord. We also have a Patreon.
Yes.
Yeah, the Discord, we're doing a lot of activities there, and Patreon allows us to continue doing these videos and also to doing our in-person events, which you can check out on our website, psychologyforgeeks.com. You can check out everything that we're doing with the donations that you guys are giving us. So thank for joining us today and making it to the end of this video, and we will see you on the next one. And don't forget to reframe and re-enchant your life. Bye.